Former British Prime Minister and currently the Foreign Secretary to the United Kingdom, Lord David Cameron has said that if Russia President Vladimir Putin should win the war in Ukraine, the rest of the world would suffer because, according to him, Putin believes might is right. David Cameron stated this at the United Nations Security Council meeting in New York on Friday, the eve to the 2-year anniversary since Russia military invaded Ukraine on February 24, 2022. Lord David Cameron, while addressing the UN Security Council, warned against giving up on Ukraine, saying there would be consequences of withdrawing support for Ukraine in its war against Russia. The statement from David Cameron came as Ukraine is faced with challenges of acute shortages of ammunition, just as European countries are struggling to find enough stocks to send across to them. It would be recalled that American military aid worth over $60 billion was stalled over political differences in the American Congress. According to the Foreign Secretary, 2 years on, I recognize some want to rethink. There is a sense of fatigue, there are other problems, a compromise might seem attractive. But this is wrong. We must recognize the cost of giving up. Putin has said there will be no peace until Russia's goals are achieved, and in his recent interview, he studiously avoided confirming he was satisfied with the land seized from Ukraine at present. This is not a man-seeking compromise, rather, this is a new imperialist bully who believes that might is right. If Putin eked out some kind of win, the rest of the world would suffer too. History teaches us that when we don't involve and help defend a country against a dictator's invasions, when we eventually get involved, the price that is paid in money, and the price that is paid ultimately in American lives is greater. I said that if we did not stand up to Putin, he would be back for more. Now, having tried and failed to conquer all of Ukraine, the lesson of this history is clear. If we do not stand up to Putin, he will be back for more. David Cameron added that he believes the world has started properly to wake up to Putin's menace. Lord Cameron went on to criticize the Russian leaders, a historical claim, Ukraine's existence is anti-Russian. A claim which runs contrary to the principle of self-determination, one of the foundations of the United Nations. The Foreign Secretary criticized the Russian claims that Western nations are somehow out to dismember Russia, a central lie in the conflict as he and other leaders spent years trying to build relationships with Moscow. We did that because we profoundly believe that a secure, stable Russia, at peace with its neighbors, is in our interests and the world's, he said. It is a tragedy that Putin prefers to hark back to the 9th century to justify aggression rather than taking up this offer of a different path. A win in Ukraine for Putin would not end there. Putin could easily apply his distortions of history elsewhere, such as Moldova or the Baltic states, and others will be emboldened to turn to fighting when it suits them, Lord Cameron said. No country with a large, aggressive neighbor would be safe. So yes, we should stand by Ukraine, but not just for Ukraine, not just for Europe, but for the world and a simple principle. The security of borders, the sanctity of nations, the principle of self-determination. Ukraine's fight is our fight, the world's fight, and the world must stay strong. Also speaking at the UK Security Council, David Cameron said, we all must to stand up to Putin. Adding, if we give into the idea that one country can invade another with impunity, then we will be left in a dreadful situation, where any country could face a similar fate. Respect for sovereignty lies at the heart of the international system, at the heart of the United Nations. Nothing matters more to its members than having our borders treated as inviolable. And that's why nothing should matter more to us than seeing Putin fail. We must not falter. We must stand firm. Sky News reported that, at the UN meeting, Tory Pierre started his UN speech by saying he warned about the dangers of Vladimir Putin in 2008 when he was leader of the opposition, and Russian troops entered South Ossetia in Georgia. And he spoke of how he was prime minister in 2014 when Putin's little green men entered Crimea.
Days after February the 24th, the United Nations General Assembly declared that the invasion was wrong and that Russia must withdraw immediately. 2 years on, this has not changed. And so today I want to pose two questions. My first to the Kremlin. My first visit as Foreign Secretary was to Ukraine. I stood in the wreckage of Odessa's bombed-out cathedral. I saw brave Ukrainians kissing loved ones goodbye as they left to defend their homeland. And I know that such scenes are not limited to Ukraine. Russian mothers, too, have had to bid farewell to Russian sons. Russian cities, too, now bear the scars of war. So my question to Putin is simple. Why? His government claims this to be a battle between brothers. What twisted form of brotherhood is this for which so many lives must be ruined? How is Russia living up to its responsibilities as a permanent member of this council to uphold international peace and security? And how many ridiculous explanations have we now had for this invasion? Are they criminals or are they fellow Russians? One minute Ukraine is an existential threat, the next we're told it doesn't exist. Are you fighting stooges of NATO or Nazis? The only people behaving like Nazis are the Putin regime, invading another country and hoping the world will be weak and let you get away with it. That is the simple truth. Putin believes he can take territories, redraw borders, exercise force to build his empire, and we must not let this stand. We know Ukraine's answer. We saw the courage of President Zelensky 2 years ago. And I say to the permanent representative of the Russian Federation, he is quite capable, and the Ukrainian people are quite capable of making up their own mind about whether they should surrender part of their country to your illegal invasion. And today we admire the perseverance of the Ukrainian people day in, day out. They won't falter. Indeed, they're continuing to push Russia back, liberating half the land Putin seized and driving the Russian Navy out of its base in Sevastopol. The course of the war may ebb and flow, but the seizure of a small town does not change the reality of Russia's situation. The Russian military is being drained of its modern equipment. You're having to rely on poor quality shells from Pyongyang. And you sent a generation of Russian boys into the meat grinder. What do you tell their mothers they died for? Or don't you even bother? The Kremlin expected Ukraine to fold, but they are standing firm for their freedom. And you should all know Britain's answer as well. Last month, the Prime Minister was the first foreign leader to address the Rada. We are the first country to have signed a security pact with Ukraine. And yesterday, we imposed further sanctions, clamping down on Russia's military-industrial complex and those enablers seeking to keep it running. These sanctions are a reminder. We won't falter. We will stand firm for Ukraine's freedom. And the world has also seen Alexei Navalny's answer. He showed incredible courage in returning to Russia. He didn't falter, and he has now suffered terrible consequences for standing firm for Russian democracy. And today is an opportunity, Secretary General, to give the world's answer. All of us abhor needless suffering. None of us have escaped the economic consequences of the war. And yet we all know what is at stake here. In acting so brazenly, Putin is not only trying to seize a chunk of his neighbor's territory, he is not only trying to extinguish the Ukrainian people's right to self-determination, he is openly trying to upset the international order, replacing it not with some progressive vision of equality of nations, but with a return to a 19th century ideology where might, particularly his might, is right. That is why we must all stand up to Putin, not just out of sympathy to Ukraine, but because his actions in Ukraine are so dangerous for everyone else. If we give in to the idea that one country can invade another with impunity, then we will be left in a dreadful situation where any country could face a similar fate. Respect for sovereignty lies at the heart of the international system, at the heart of the United Nations. Nothing matters more to its members than having our borders treated as inviolable. And that's why nothing should matter more to us than seeing Putin fail. We must not falter. We must stand firm. Thank you.
Welcome, bringing you the news in a more digital way.